Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin.
And pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. We are so excited that you are joining us today. How are you, Dr. Virginia?
I am doing good. I'm doing good. We were talking a little earlier, just dealing with kind of an ongoing frustration for the past few weeks of having problems with my text messages going through, including some from Val this morning. They just kind of will come through all at once in these batches. And it's like, I'll just get 20 or 30 all at once. And I won't really know when people sent them or how long they've been waiting on a response. But the weird thing is, like, in between these big batches, I will still get like little onesie twosies.
Oh,
and
you
so,
do?
Yeah. So it's not like I go for a day with no text messages. It's like, I'll have a few come through and then all of a sudden I'll have like 30 come through, which is So I feel like I've apologized to everyone enough times. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have no idea when you sent this. I'm just not getting it. To where I think, I don't know. And I've heard other people are having the same problem, something with a tower or something. So,
well, I knew that it kind of started happening to you around the time of the hurricane, like the bad weather.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wondered, could it have something to do
damage?
with that? Because,
possibly.
Oh, it's so frustrating because especially in the world that we live in today, everyone expects that you're going to be able to immediately respond to any phone call, to any text message. And so when you're not getting them, it's that sense of, wait, is she just busy? Did she not get it? How do we know?
About me?
Just exactly. So you don't want to like for me, like this morning, I hated to ask again, but I was like, maybe she's really busy, but I didn't. I just wanted her to make sure she saw the text, or so you just have that sense of not knowing.
Right.
And so I thought it was just a perfect example to lead into our topic of conversation today. Because communication and how we communicate with parents, with our volunteers, with our community is so important. And it's something that can often sort of fall between the cracks of just our daily work and trying to get things ready. And so I thought that it might be a great conversation for us to have, just to sort of think through, how are we communicating with people and how are we getting our thoughts across to everyone? It's so frustrating when you spend so much time on an event and so much time on something that you want to do special for your parents, or so much time on something that you're doing with the kids, and then hardly anyone shows up, or you have people say, oh, I didn't know you did that, or I didn't hear anything about it. And so you've spent all this time preparing. And so we want to make sure that we're communicating really well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we were talking about this earlier. Sometimes even the first step is communicating just within the church staff. And we've talked about this before, about how it's easy for ministries to get siloed. And it can even take intentional effort just across the church staff to stay informed and to stay in communication about events and things.
We've mentioned before how a huge portion of being a children's minister is not just the work that we do with the kids, but there's a huge chunk of it that is actually administration. And so part of that is thinking through, how often do we have staff meetings? What do we present at our staff meetings? What do we do when we do get together and go over calendar? Are we making sure that we calendar correctly? And so really making sure that your staff is aware of your events is one of the most important things that you can do, because they're going to communicate things to their people. You want to make sure that you don't have other ministries planning events on the same days or the same weeks when you're going to have a big event. So you want to make sure as a church staff, you are aware of one another's big events. And so if you aren't calendaring during your staff meetings, if you aren't taking time to sort of go group by group around the table with everybody's ministry to see what they're working on, what's coming up, what events you have, that's something you really want to discuss with your pastor and find out, is there a way that we can somehow add this planning time to our meetings? Can we add this planning time to our month? Maybe you have a church where you don't meet as a full staff on a regular basis. And so maybe that's just a possibility of you going and saying, could we just have a quick calendar meeting just once a month or once a quarter where we can go over our calendar and talk about the events that are coming up just really quickly, just so that we're aware of one another's events and one another's, ministry, so that we can support each other and encourage people to be a part of ministries, and so that they can, so you can know. And I think that that's something that we often get so caught up in everything that's going on, we kind of miss, we skip doing.
Right.
And it's like you said, we do become very siloed, and this is just a children's ministry thing. Oh, our music minister doesn't need to know about this. But it is important for all of the staff to be aware of what's happening.
Because then if your music minister thinks, oh, I'm just doing a music ministry thing, we're going to do a fellowship, it really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? No one else needs to know. But then if it's the same time as your children's ministry event, and you've got parents in the choir and parents who want to come to your children's ministry event. And so
I've had those conversations so many times where they're like, well, it's just the choir that's going to be involved, so I didn't think you needed to know. And I'm like, oh, but my volunteers sing in the choir, so they can't do this because they're needing to do that. And so it's just those kinds of respecting one another's ministries enough to be able to say, hey, I just want to let you know we have this is a really big event for us. And so it could cause some conflict. So is there a way that I can help figure out a way we can do this in a different time or something, so that it doesn't conflict with one another? And I know with large churches, it's hard to do that. We don't want to over calendar our families.
Yes.
That's one of the things that can happen really easily, is that we can overwhelm them with events and overwhelm them with things that they need to do. And we don't want to do that. We want them to be able to enjoy coming to church, but still have the ability to do family nights at home and to do other things, so that they're not just so over calendared with church events that they can't do anything on their own. But we do want to make sure that we have opportunities for them in different areas of ministry. And so it's a really big thing to do.
So I was just going to share some things that churches that I've been at and are at, some things that we do. We do have an administrative assistant who is the one that sort of keeps the calendar. We do have a form that goes to our relevant staff members, and then the calendar. I actually brought an agenda from our staff meeting that's just different topics. And then the back is different events that are coming up. And so usually we have about 3 months worth of events on the back of our staff meeting agenda. So we don't necessarily talk about them every week, but they are. And so you can compare that to your calendar as well. Outside of the staff meeting time.
As a staff, do you have a time that you get together to do calendaring for the year? We
do it twice a year. So we have 2 days, one in February, one in July, where we do calendaring for the year. And so we calendar a year out each time. And so part of it, sort of the first part is reviewing 6 months that we have already looked at. And that we've already, sort of calendar, but sometimes we need to make adjustments. And then we calendar for another 6 month time period that we haven't really looked at all. And we start trying to get those dates. And so we calendar twice a year as a staff for a whole year.
We always, especially at the last church where I served, I love the way we did it, because we did have sort of a retreat day so that we got away from the building.
We do the same thing.
Even if we stayed local and we just went to like a hotel conference, room or something, just so that we were sort of away from the building, had the calendar, went through, calendared everything for the year. And then the other thing that we did that I really appreciated was that soon after that, we would have a meeting with the deacons and any other significant church leaders, so that we could go over the calendar that we did with them, and then have them remind us of anything maybe that we left off, or something that maybe their ministry, like for example, if we had like the WMU was a ministry within our church at the time. And so she would sometimes have events that her group would want to do that she needed to clear through us. So she would bring those things to that meeting so that we could set everything up for the year. And then again, like you said, if they had something new that popped up, they had a little form that they filled out and they turned it in, and then we discussed at the staff meeting. But having these 2 meetings for the year,
right,
to set up the full church calendar for the year was so helpful to make sure we didn't miss anything. There wasn't any conflict, that all the big events were on the calendar and set and ready to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So just as the more communication that you can have internally and the more prepared that you can be, the more it helps your external communication, maybe not even external, but outside the staff, to your families, your parents, your volunteers, your community. Absolutely. So that's sort of like the foundation of having good communication within your staff and then going out from there.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I have noticed that so many churches do not do is that they do not keep up their public calendar. For example, if they have a calendar on their websites, they do not keep it updated on a regular basis, or it's set up just to look at 1 month at a time so that you can't say, like, for example, if my husband and I wanted to plan vacation, but we didn't want to plan it around, Vacation Bible School and maybe the Christmas, church event, the musical, to be able to look at a calendar without having to contact somebody is so helpful. And a lot of times, if we're doing it at night and we couldn't call somebody and find out, then we would just be, well, we're going to set our dates and then we'll just have to see. But if we had that information, it would be so helpful. And so a lot of churches will have calendars on their website, or they'll have, something like that for some sort of a program that members can go to look. And they don't keep it updated. And so that information is not there. And so it's so important as a church staff, that you make sure that there's somebody that's responsible for keeping that calendar updated. And that information is out there and available to everyone.
So it's like you go to the website, you're like, I can see what they did in like 2017.
Yes. But it
doesn't help me now.
No, it really doesn't. And so, but I think too, it's a great outreach, because for me, as we look for a new church, whenever we've been in that process, one of the things that I've always done is to go on a website and take a look at it and to kind of see, what kinds of events do they do throughout the year and what kinds of things, are they involved with? And so when that information isn't available, then, you don't have that opportunity to sort of share with people what you do. So,
So that's one of the things we do. We have like an events page on our website that highlights the big events. So that there's little things that aren't on there, but definitely the big events, usually for the next 3 or 4 months, are on that events page on our website. So,
and I just saw a tweet this week from a pastor that mentioned that if you don't have a website, that your church is really losing an outreach opportunity, because he just really felt like that there's no one anymore that's going to attend a church without first going to the website and taking a look at the mission statement and looking at the events and looking at what kinds of information they have there. And so it really is a vital piece for your ministry now, because, people aren't necessarily just going to walk in sight unseen. I know for us, we definitely are looking at websites, checking to see what churches are saying and what they're doing before we even walk in the door. And so it's really important that you have that media presence so that you can let people know about your church so that they can come visit then at that point and feel a little bit more comfortable. Well, one of the first groups that we want to make sure we're communicating well with after the staff is aware of what's happening are our volunteers.
Yes.
Dr. Virginia, do you have a way that you specifically contact your volunteers and keep them updated?
Lots of ways. Lots of ways. And that's, I feel like, going to be the theme throughout this episode, is that we want to communicate in a lot of different ways, because you're going to touch different people. And so definitely, and making sure our volunteers are well informed can be, in some ways, a first line of defense in making sure our families are well informed and even getting messages out to the community. Because if our volunteers can speak correctly about our events and share that information, then that's a huge help to us. And so, I mean, whenever it comes to keeping my volunteers informed, a lot of things. I mean, I do, and this kind of goes for parents as well, but I send emails. We have we have 2 different things. We have an active Facebook page, because pages are more public facing. We have some closed Facebook groups for our volunteers, our key leaders, our parents. And those we can share information more freely because we have to approve people to join them, and it's not just like randos. And so it's our volunteers, it's our parents, it's our people. So we use those Facebook groups, automated emails through our church database. I send text messages, and I will do flyers that I give to our teachers, flyers for our parents. And so mailing postcards to homes. I really, for any sort of large event for volunteers, for families, we approach our communication about it in multiple ways.
Yes.
Because again, you're not just going to do one thing that's going to hit everybody. Right. You have to approach it multiple ways, because some people will see your post on Facebook. Some people will read their email. Some people don't ever read their email.
Never. And that's what we have to remember is that a lot of people never check their email, even though they have an email and they say you can email them, but they still have to actually look at it. And so I did a conference years ago, back really when social media started, when we first had Twitter, when we first started with Facebook. This was, I know, ancient times. But I did a conference because so many people at that time were not familiar with social media at all. They weren't familiar with Facebook. They weren't familiar with Twitter. They didn't understand how those mediums worked. And one of the things that I would say in that conference, I tried to really emphasize during that conference that you want to choose a medium that your people are using, because you can have an amazing Twitter account. You can have an amazing Facebook account. But if none of your people are on Twitter or on Facebook, if none of your people do Instagram, if they don't follow Pinterest, if they aren't on Facebook, then they're not going to see your messages. And so what you really have to do first is to find out, where are your people? Because if you say to them, I have created this Instagram account, and they have no interest in being part of Instagram, you're never going to reach them. So what you have to do is to find out, are the majority of your parents on Instagram? Are they on Twitter? Find out. And one of the things that I did with the volunteers is that I had a little form and I had them
fill survey.
Out, when they filled out all the information and they gave me their email address, I would also ask, do you have, an Instagram handle? Do you have a Twitter handle? Do you have, what social media are you involved in? So that helped me to see, okay, if I have no one that's on Twitter,
there's no point.
Then there's no point in taking the time to do that. And so you really want to find out, but that's the point. And if you have a multiple mediums that they are on, then that means you're going to have to be involved in multiple mediums. You're going to have to find a way to figure out that particular social media type and cater to it a little bit more. The nice thing about it is, coming from a person who has Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, is that there are a lot of ways now that makes it
just link them all together.
There are a lot of things you can do now to link them all together so that you can just do one post, but it's going to show up on TikTok. It's going to show up on Instagram. It's going to show up on Twitter, so that way you aren't having to redo something every single time. But you do want to find out, where are the majority of your volunteers and how can you best communicate with them. But as you were saying, it's incredibly important for us to stay in contact with our volunteers, to let them know what's coming up so that they can tell their people.
Yes.
Because that's going to help you to be able to not have to stress quite so much about making sure you're reaching everyone, because they are helping you reach everyone that they are particularly involved. There was nothing that drove me crazier than somebody saying, well, I knew that Tom was super involved in children's ministry, and I asked him about the event and he said he didn't know anything about it. So I just assumed you weren't doing one. And then, and so then I'm like, oh, I am not making sure my volunteers have the information to let them know. And one of the things that I would say to them in meetings, when we did have meetings with our volunteers, because I did try to do those, I tried to do once a quarter. Sometimes it ended up being, a couple times a year. but to try to say to them, to let them know, even if you don't think you're going to be able to be a part of this event or that you're coming, if you could just kind of be familiar with just the general information so you can tell people about it and let them know, so that way we can just have more people talking about a certain event.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think if we get that feedback, that parents don't know about events and that families don't know about events, our first reaction may be to be frustrated with our volunteers, but really that's our responsibility. Like it's our responsibility to ensure that everyone's on the same page. Like if we're getting frustrated saying, why aren't people reading my emails? It goes back to our earlier conversation. We have to meet them where they're already at. And so that frustration really lies with us, and that responsibility lies with us. And so it's our responsibility to find those methods and find those creative ways to communicate with our volunteers, with our families. One other way to communicate with families is, I know a lot of schools and elementary schools will use things like Remind or GroupMe or other apps as well, other messaging apps. So, it's probably worth finding out what are the ways that schools are communicating. Are parents accustomed to Remind? Do they already use Remind, like with the school? And so that's another avenue and another outlet for you to be able to communicate with them in a way that they're already familiar with.
But I think all of those reminders are incredibly important. Even though I had a billion different ways that I would let people know the preschool schedule for volunteers.
Yes.
I would still have people when I would text them the day before just to send out that little reminder, because I would send the lesson, a little link to the lesson along with a little text message. And I would always get those, oh, I'm so glad I almost forgot that I had it in the morning. Those finding those ways that you can, just give them that quick little reminder, those things that you can do. And like you said, so many of the software programs that we use for our churches have these built-in ways that you can email, that you can text, that you can do different things with. So I think, again, being familiar with your media, being familiar with all the opportunities that you may already have at your disposal that you maybe weren't even aware of, can really help you in keeping those volunteers in touch. What are some of the ways that you did contact your parents over the years? What are some of those methods that you've used?
Yeah, so we've used a lot of the same methods with the things like Facebook posts, Facebook events, texts, emails. I was at a church previously that did have a system where we could send out pre-recorded messages like via phone call. And so we would do those as well. And flyers. Sending home a flyer with a kid on a Sunday morning sometimes that can be a little dangerous. But also it's nice to have something to put on your refrigerator. So really you can achieve that same thing even through cards, like postcards. And so, we would do bulk mails of postcards for big events like VBS, Upward Sports, our big events, we would do like these giant bulk mails of postcards. And so,
and one of the things you have to realize too now is that there are a lot of people who don't check their mail. I have been surprised, especially at our last church, the people that would just only check their mail maybe once a month, because now you seriously, because especially for younger parents, they do everything digitally, so they don't really get mail anymore. And so, and like, for example, for us, my husband looks at our mail on the app, and because he'll look at the pictures of what we're getting in the mail.
Oh, wow.
And if it's nothing that he's in a hurry for, then he'll wait till the next day to go stop down at the mailbox, because we have the key. We have to use a key in our mailbox.
Gotcha.
And so he'll just, again, it's one of those things that everyone communicates in such a different way than we're used to. So you can't rely on that. But the bulk mail way of informing people can be really, really helpful, to be able to send out those note cards, to be able to send out those little things so that they have something. And one of the things that I did a lot of times when I had flyers or something that needed to go home with parents, I didn't necessarily send it home with the kids. A lot of times I would have it in the life group room for the Bible study, where the parents meet for Bible study. Or I would make sure I had them on the table going, into the sanctuary where because back at that point they were still picking up bulletins. And so that way they had other locations, because typically if I sent it with kids, I usually found them in the parking lot on the ground.
Yeah.
So I had to try to be a little bit more strategic with the way that we did that. Now it's one thing when you have the parents that are, picking up.
They're picking up, and so you put it in their hand.
You put it in their hands.
Yes.
But if you have the older kids, like the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, if you don't have them being picked up, which again, if you listen to safety and security, I think they really do. But a lot of churches don't have them picked up. They get parents assigned to just release. And so then you again run into that, how are parents getting it in their hands? So it's finding those ways to be able to do that for sure.
And we still do bulletins at our church. We do them Sunday morning. We do them Wednesday night. We have a separate list of announcements for our Sunday school classes. And so you're right. Those are all great avenues to put that information for parents to be able to find out about events.
Yes. Well, for sure. And that's one of the things, if you attend a really large church, if you are a staff member of a really large church, I know that bulletins have sort of gone by the wayside for a lot of churches, and a lot of churches are too large for them to be able to make announcements from the stage for every single different event that's happening, because we're talking about large churches that have a lot of events. And so they may have PowerPoint presentations that run at the beginning of the service before service starts that has events listed there, or they may or they may have other things, but you really need to make sure that any way you have to publicize your event, any opportunity that you have to put your information up on that screen, any opportunity that you might have for the larger events like Vacation Bible School, or maybe the family Christmas event, where you ask the pastor, is it possible for me to be able to make that announcement on a Sunday morning, because these are large church-wide events. And so it's finding the best way that you can communicate to your community. And that's what's really important, so that your parents are aware and so that they know.
And one thing that the churches that I've been a part of do is video announcements. And so we would do, you're right, for much larger events, church-wide events, do video announcements to where it's like, we would have, like the VBS director, and myself in a video announcement for VBS. And so things like that are, even if you can't necessarily do that every single week for those special big events, to have something that's a little different, something that's new, or something, that's people that those can be really effective means, and people will, sit up and pay attention to a video when in ways that they may not pay attention to, Brother Bob reading the announcements or whatever.
Or even for some large events to have maybe a kiosk set up, a booth set up in the lobby on certain Sundays where parents can come and get information, especially at your fall kickoffs, or maybe when you're coming back from the holiday break, to have these kind of things to say, hey, come see what we're doing over the next couple of months in our children's ministry, and have like a little giveaway, maybe some candy, something themed, and then have a little sheet that kind of goes through. So that way that would cover you from, say, August until December, and then do it again in January, and have January to May, so that you have just those opportunities to be able to get that information, which also means that you need to be calendaring early. Like, you need to know really early what you're going to be doing for these particular quarters, so that you can get that information out to them. You may still have a super successful event if you're doing something last minute, but you have to realize that you can't sustain that. You can't continue to just do last minute events and have people participate, because you might get lucky and have people that aren't scheduled for something else and were able to attend. But if it's a regular event, there's really no reason why you can't have it on a calendar, have those dates set up so that people can plan for it and really be aware that it's coming, and be able to invite visitors and other people to come. It's harder to do that last minute. And so it's really great to be able to have that opportunity.
Well, speaking of guests and visitors, what are some of the ways that we can communicate our events, particularly our events that we want to be outreach events, to our community, to our neighbors, to people around us?
I think that's another thing that you have to be really familiar with. How does your community communicate? Is there a place where you can put flyers up and everybody's going to see it because everybody goes to that coffee shop or everybody goes to that restaurant? Is there a radio station that people listen to that, could make announcements for you, that have those kinds of events that they that they publicize through their medium? Do you have a neighborhood Facebook account that doesn't mind on certain days? Like, for example, for our small town, we have a Facebook page that's like what's happening or something like that.
Yes,
That's the name of it. But when they have certain days, like on Tuesdays, you can publicize certain things, and on, so they have those, you can't just do it any day, but certain days you can publicize upcoming events or your business or those kinds of things. So finding those kinds of things in your town that you can participate with so that you can get out your information is incredibly important.
Yeah, we have, I was going to suggest that exact same thing. We've got some different little community Facebook groups that I'm a part of that are very popular in our community. And then we've got a couple moms groups as well. And so those are great places to advertise events, to advertise, your VBS, your fall festival, your MOPS, or some sort of, parents' night out. Those kinds of places are great for advertising those events.
Yes.
And so, yeah, another thing that we'll do is, for some of our large events, we will create, like a Facebook event, and then we will advertise it or boost the post or whatever. We will pay a little bit of money to get that event and to get that information in front of more people. And so, that's something that you can consider doing. You can also just do it the old-fashioned way and ask your people to be like, hey, we created this event. Please respond that you're going. Please share it. Please comment. Please like. And so you don't want to overwhelm your people with those kind of requests. You don't want to be asking them to be liking and sharing something every single week. But, if there's a special big event, once a quarter that you really want to get that information out there, you'd be like, hey, everybody, respond to the VBS event, share it, like it, invite other people to it. And those can be great ways to get that information out to the community.
Well, and we talked about, like, for example, when I would do the fall event that we do at the church, when I would have the fall festival, the bonfire, whatever it was that we were having for the particular fall event, one of the things that I had in the goodie bag would be information for the next big event that I was having. So for me, for the fall, the next big event would be our family Christmas night. And so I would make sure I had that information in that bag to hand out. So I wanted to be prepared at each big event to let them know this is what our church is doing soon, so that they would be aware of it and so that they could, be able to plan for it. And so it's really huge.
You can take the information that you've gathered from previous year's VBSs, from previous years of fall festivals, and send emails, send cards in the mail. And so you can do something similar, even just with the information that you already have from people who have already attended some of your events in the past, and get kind of some fertile ground to till up for these outreach events.
Right. I think what we're really saying here is that it's important for you to be familiar with your community and maybe talk with some other children's ministers in your area that have been doing this maybe a little bit longer than you have, or that have been in that area a little longer than you have, and ask them, what are some ways in this community that you found to be successful in reaching the community with your information? What things kind of work here? Because that's the thing. Not every single method works in every single location. Right. It really is according to the community. And I remember that so very well, because one of the very first conferences I had when I was talking about social media, an older gentleman raised his hand and he said, "We don't have internet yet." Like this, because like I said, this was years and years ago. And he was like, "So what should I do if we don't have internet?" Yeah, like we don't even do. And I was like, because it was a very rural community in Tennessee. And I said, "You know what?" I said, "Then that's not going to be effective for you.
Don't worry about it.
Wait until we start talking about some of our other things that we're going to talk about." But you really can't, you have to know where you are and where your people are and the space that you're in. And one is not better than the other.
Right.
Instagram is not more effective than Twitter or those kind of things. You can't, you can't compare them because they're apples and oranges according to your community and who is involved in what. And so it's just really, really important that you are familiar with your people, familiar with your community, and that you try different things. Sometimes I would try certain things to generate some more interest in an event, and it would just fall flat. We wouldn't get anything. Because honestly, I will tell you this, and I still believe this: personal invitations work better than any other kind of promotion you could possibly do.
Yes.
Somebody will drive past a billboard 100 times and not notice it. But if their next door neighbor invites them to bring their kids to VBS, they will come.
Yes.
So
Yes.
personal invitations, relationships are always going to be the number one way to reach people and to bring people in.
Amen.
But you also don't want to miss any opportunity that you might have from someone seeing the information about your church. Maybe someone that isn't involved in church anywhere and doesn't know somebody that's involved in church, but they might see a flyer, they might see a notice, they might see an ad. And so you never want to say, oh, I'm not going to try doing anything ever, because you never know what might work. But
Right.
one of the things that you really want to try to encourage in your people is that the more that they can invite people, the more they can talk about their church, the more they can talk
Yes.
about their events and the children's
Yes.
ministry, the more people you're going to have involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and that even goes to something so simple as we have this upcoming Sunday, we have a big training event for our volunteers. And I started last month with our once a month nursery volunteers going around to each room with a flyer, even though they've already gotten an email, even though I've sent text messages, even though I've sent, other forms of communication, on the week of their service, in the month leading up to this event, going to their room, handing them a flyer with a QR code to register and say, hey, we have this upcoming, training. It's super important. It's going to be super valuable. I would love to see you there.
Yes.
And so even with something as simple as volunteer training, doing my best to personally invite every one of our volunteers, even our 80 volunteers on our nursery rotation, personally inviting them to come and attend this training. So, I mean, it works for big events. It works for small events. You're right. That personal invitation is still the most effective way to reach people. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, friends, for joining us with this conversation about communication. And we hope that you found something helpful, that you found something useful. We would love it if you would leave us a comment and send us a question. We just want to meet you where you are and try to serve you as you serve your families. And so thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.